Hello, welcome everyone to the second webinar in our Faculty Ask Me Anything series. This one is devoted to our colleagues in elementary and lower schools who are designing and implementing online learning with younger students and, of course, their families. My name is Kelsey Hall, and I'm the Associate Director of School Engagement at GOA. I am joined by my colleague, Jason Cummings, our Director of Student Programs, who is going to be helping us moderate the live Q&A, and I hope might chime in on a few topics as well. Additionally, I am delighted to welcome our three panelists who are all friends of GOA and expert educators and leaders in elementary and lower school education. I'm going to let Megan, Aaron, and Jamie introduce themselves in just a moment, but first I wanted to cover a few logistics. This webinar is recorded, and we will be posting that recording on our COVID-19 resource page on our website within the next few days. And thank you for submitting questions through the registration process. We're going to tackle as many of those as we can during this 1-hour session. But we are also using the Q&A function for live questions, and Jason will help to facilitate that. But we'll reserve about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the webinar to address as many of those as we can as well. And just to note, the chat function has been disabled just to alleviate confusion. We're going to work with the Q&A module there. So without further ado, I'd like to get started with our panelists. If you all could introduce yourselves, tell us a bit about your homeschool and your role and sort of where you're at with your distance learning plans in your school. Let's see, on my screen, it's Jamie. Jamie, would you like to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jamie Everett, and I work at Park Tudor School in Indianapolis. I teach 4th grade. And up until this year, I was the technology integrator for our lower school as well. I did that for 6 years. And then I actually have 2 kids in our lower school right now. So I'm designing and trying to help my husband teach at home.
Awesome. Megan?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Bunit, and I'm the head of academic technology at the Park School in Brookline, Massachusetts. We're an independent co-ed day school with grades pre-K to 8, about 530, 540 students. I've been at Park for 4 years. Before that, I was at Buckingham Brown and Nichols in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the King School in Connecticut. I also have an 8th grade child in my school, so I'm balancing working and parenting.
Great. Aaron.
Hi, everybody. I'm Erin Callahan, and I am the head of our lower school at Rippewam-Sisquah in northern Westchester. We are a preschool through, our lower campus is a preschool through 4th grade program. And we are in week 3 of our distance learning plan. And like many of you, we've rolled it out in stages. So we are now in stage 2. And I am also the mom of a 2nd grader and a 5th grader at our school.
Great. So we're all balancing, as Jason is too, I can attest, the parent, educator, working parent roles right now. So I'm sure there are a lot of questions related to that. But first, just let me say we all realize here that designing online learning for the elementary level is truly unprecedented. So as we're going through these questions, and thank you so much, it's going to help us talk about a few themes that we see, and as we go through, we'll pay attention to those questions that come in. But I think the best place to start from my perspective is the parent communication and support side, because obviously designing for elementary students, it's a different ballgame when it comes to that, and the parent support is needed so much. So I'm just going to start with one of these questions, and I think this might be one that maybe you can all sort of speak to, but let me know if you want to touch this one first. So what are effective ways to help families understand the distance learning experience for young children, and to have realistic expectations?
I can start with that. I'll, just to let you know, I think right now, I think we're all in the same boat where we have been trying things that have been working. We've been trying things that just aren't working. So when we first started to roll out our plan, I had best intentions of sending out this, 4-page email, this document that really outlined our whole plan with the expectation that families were really going to read it, in such a detailed way. And then this week we've had parent coffees by grade level to really just highlight parts of the program and make it a little bit more intimate where families could ask questions. It was amazing for me to see how many of our families actually didn't get around to reading that email. Surprise. I mean, everybody's dealing with so much of their own lives right now. So I think if you haven't already done so within your own school communities, hosting those parent coffees and trying to get them to be more by grade and having them be more smaller and intimate so that you can describe your program, you can go through in detail what it is and the reasons why you've chosen either the platforms or the program that you have, and then to be able to really just save time at the end for them to be able to ask questions. I thought that was incredibly effective this week.
Great. Jamie, from the classroom perspective, as a classroom teacher, what has that communication process been like for you with parents?
I think, it's required a lot of empathy. Mm-hmm. Because I, as a parent myself, I find myself getting frustrated with what my kids can and can't do on the technology. And I have to remember that most parents are probably operating on even less academic technology experience than I have. And so I think communication in general has had, we have really tried to convey a sense of, we are here to help. We are right here with you. We know this is frustrating. We know it's not going to be a good day every day. And we're just going to keep carrying on as best that we can. Just to catch up on what Erin was saying, they're not always going to read all the emails, but I think one of the things that we all as a faculty have had to realize is that now more than ever, what happens with the kids' education is out of our control. So whether or not parents are reading emails, whether or not kids are getting online, we kind of have to just take it with a grain of salt and just provide what we can and hope that parents can stay as active and proactive as they possibly can.
And if I could just piggyback on what Jamie was saying too, that, to lead with empathy right now, one of the best pieces of advice that I was given as a school administrator is to just, always make the assumption that families are right now struggling in some way, even though they may not be. So to come at it from that place of empathy, we're thinking, parents, that a lot of them are working from home. They could be dealing with illness in their own families. And they're really looking for school leaders, whether it be a school administrator or a teacher. They're really looking to us right now to be that stabilizing force, to be that, that person, that stable person in their lives. And so for a lot of them, if they are coming back and, they're upset or they're angry or they're anxious, to be able to take that and to hold it and to know that, almost like we do as parents, when our kids come home at the end of the day and they give us all of the terrible things that happened throughout their day, for us to be able as teachers and administrators to be able to take those from parents and really hold them, knowing that they're going through such a hard time and they're really looking for us to be, that stable force.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that's been key for us at Park and will be key for our success going forward is providing two things: clarity and consistency. And we're in week 3. It feels like month 3 somehow.
Yes.
It's easy to forget that we're, just rolling this out now. And so we are going to be adjusting as we go along, but the idea will be to build consistency over time. So once we find what works, sticking with that. So parents know what to expect when they're juggling a lot, sometimes multiple kids, they're working full time, they're on their own devices. And as much as possible, we need the children to be independent, so that they don't need the parents to come in and set something up and get something going or do the teaching themselves.
Right.
So providing that consistency in our communications is key.
Yeah, we actually found too that after the first 2 weeks, this is our third week, phase 2, that we had to streamline, and we had to use similar platforms or the same platform in every grade level. And we had to structure what each Canvas course was going to look like, so that when parents went online to help their child go through each assignment, it was going to look and flow almost identical to every other grade level.
Right. We did the same thing. You know, one of the benefits of us, we started our, so we're 3 weeks in as well, and being able to reach out to some other schools that, you know, had already started their remote learning plans, and were either a week or 2 weeks in. That was feedback that we got that was really successful, was that to be able to have, you know, one streamlined source of communication, and for elementary schools, having that be the homeroom teacher. That was one piece of advice that I felt like was incredibly helpful. And so that's really what we've been doing. And so we've been able, you know, to use like a Google Doc, and to be able to have kids have their own individual schedules, to be able to send those out on a Sunday evening, so families get them for the week with all of the links live right there, so that it's one, just one form of communication that's coming out.
Yeah. I'm officially picking my family up and moving to one or your other schools. As a parent of 4 with the oldest in 3rd grade, I would express empathy with those who are, you know, receiving that information about many different platforms in many different ways from many different people. Even as someone who's relatively facile with academic tech, quite a job to keep up on all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard.
One question that comes up that's sort of related to this that we have on this list is related closely in that do you have any strategies for families who are maybe not engaging in the online learning? They're not meeting those synchronous times, or we're not seeing any follow-up from that. Do you have any strategies, maybe as a classroom teacher, but also as an administrator, for making connections with those families and what to do?
You know, I can jump in quick. We just, I finished this afternoon, we had all of our grade level meetings with our teachers, and that very thing just came up. And, you know, right now, the advice that I gave to our teachers, because it's so individual, you know, it could be that one student's really connecting, one student isn't. If you have a student that's not connecting, you know, my advice to that teacher was, you know, let's reach out, let's see what's going on. There's so many things that could be happening. You know, it's so tricky with elementary age students, because particularly like the little guys, my nursery school students all the way through 2nd grade, you know, they're still such concrete thinkers. It's so hard for them to, you know, really understand what that, you know, I'm at school, but I'm at home, and it's so hard. And I don't know if you guys are seeing the same thing, but at least in our school, some students, especially some of the younger students, really are needing to take a step back because they're feeling so emotional about it. And that's okay. And I think that's where we have to come from, is to be able to say, listen, this is where you're at. That's okay. So I'm telling my teachers, just reach out. It could be that a family member's sick. It could be that, you know, this is too much for a student and it's just too emotional for them to see their classmates and not be with them. You know, that's sort of the advice that I'm giving, but I don't know if.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot, and started this week off by saying to all of our parents that the participation is expected, and it can look different for every child, but we analogized it to, you know, if your child wasn't going to come to school a certain day, you'd call in and say why your child was absent. Right. And so we asked parents to just do us a favor. If you don't expect to have one of those days where your kid's going to be able to get online, just send us a quick email saying, my kid can't participate today. And then we don't have to follow up. We don't have to wonder. And then if we still don't hear that, we just send a nice email saying, hey, just wanted to make sure if your child was on a device today and you thought they were doing their work, they're not. So, just wanted you to know.
Yeah.
And it happens.
Yeah.
All right, this one is, okay. So along with this parent communication and support, because there's such a heavy reliance on parents at this age, are there methods for translating student-centered, inquiry-driven pedagogy into distance learning while you're relying on the parent?
So I try to tackle that one and then again, like shift it because, you know, I think we're all sort of struggling with this and thinking about like best practices in our own school and project-based learning and inquiry-based learning, like how does that translate? And I think, you know, we're using our morning meeting time as really a time for teachers to, you know, have those mini lessons, and whether it's like guided inquiry and they're able to present that in their morning meetings through a mini lesson, and then having students go and do something independently, that's hard. And, you know, depending on the age of the child, you know, any sort of preschooler that's going to be doing anything outside of that direct Zoom time, there's going to be, you know, parent involvement. But for some of our, you know, older elementary students, for them to, you know, to be able to go and do the research and, you know, be able to come back, I think that the biggest thing is, you know, how are you going to ask those students to come back and have, you know, accountability? How are they going to be able to come back and present and showcase whatever their discovery was, whatever, you know, the assignment was that you gave, that was, you know, that guided inquiry. So I think that's really the piece, right? So is thinking about at what point of the day are you going to be able, you know, for them to come back and report back to you.
I'd love to jump onto that and add on. I think one of the things we're thinking a lot about is flexibility and balance. So trying to balance the online activities and the offline activities, balancing the synchronous and the asynchronous, balancing what's required and what's optional, and then balancing whole group, small group, and one-on-ones. And I think this connects to this topic. One of the things we're considering right now, opening up in our next iteration, is having passion-based projects. So giving students an opportunity to explore something that they're interested in individually and having a support structure for that, having a group that they can connect with around that and share what they're doing, and having a faculty member facilitating that learning process. Because I think this is where the flexibility comes in place. Some families might think it's too much work and some might think it's not enough, and for some it's just right. So offering student choice when possible, I think, can allow us to address this concern, giving some students options to participate in things that aren't required.
One thing I shared with some of our faculty at Park Tutor is that this is the first time we've ever had to, for lower school kids, redefine what academic behaviors look like. And for me, my experience in the last 3 weeks with my students and my own children is that we first have to teach them the new academic behaviors of clicking on a task and completing the task within a specific time frame, clicking on a quiz, answering those questions, reading an assignment, submitting a constructed response. Maybe they're going into Seesaw 2 and recording a video of their playing their recorder. There are a lot of behaviors and a lot of technological skills that the kids still have to learn and get comfortable with, I think, before we can go into more passion-based, inquiry-based projects that feel a little bit more open-ended. You know, in our house in particular, sometimes I have to ask myself, is this my child's homework or is this my homework?
Right.
And,
yes.
And I also know that right now, both of my kids love to feel the satisfaction of, I did this, 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 and it's done.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's thing you said reminded me about responsive classroom and the first 6 weeks of school and how you really need to teach the procedures and the routines. You can't assume anything. You have to teach everything.
No.
And we're essentially in a new set of first 6 weeks of school. And we really need to take that foundational time to teach those skills that our students are going to need going forward to do the content.
That's
yeah. And
That's
Megan, even more, we have to teach it to the parents too, because they don't know those academic skills either.
That's exactly where, we are right now, is that, our teachers have basically approached these first few weeks of school as like the first few weeks of September. You're going back to the very beginning of the school year. You're setting those expectations for your families and for your students. So I think if we think of it like that, we can be a little bit kinder to ourselves about, like, oh my gosh, these students are regressing. No, that's just an entirely different way of learning.
I mean, I was gonna say, I just have to say, as a parent, the set of skills that my kids are gaining from this time, on a positive note, is remarkable. I mean, truly, as we worry about their development and are they ready for that next grade level and all of those questions that come up for this, I know that they're gaining a set of skills that are going to serve them well as they move into middle school and beyond that. And I mean, for that reason, I'm thankful for you all going back and doing that beginning of the year bit with them. It's helpful. Okay, I'm going to go, just because we sort of touched on this a little bit with the synchronous, asynchronous piece. So there's a lot of talk about that at GOA. We talk a lot about when to have synchronous opportunities and when to have asynchronous opportunities. At GOA, we're driven by the necessity of, we have teachers teaching in different time zones and students all over, so that sort of dictates that. But as far as this age level and the design that you all are working with your teachers and as a teacher, what does that look like for lower school students? And maybe we break this up into like the K through 2 or pre-K through 2 and beyond that. What does the synchronous, asynchronous look like in your schedules, and why?
I can start with this one. What we are doing in K through 5, pre-K is slightly different, is we are having a daily morning meeting that is a synchronous connection for the whole group to provide connection. And then throughout the week, there's a weekly one-on-one with the teacher, and there's weekly small groups. And then in addition, we have small literacy groups for students who are already working with a literacy specialist. And then throughout the week, the teachers are providing one instructional video per subject per week. So the students are having a daily connection with the whole class, but they're also having time to work on their subjects in their own time.
And just, we're doing something very similar. So the way that we're looking at our synchronous times is to really think about, we're trying to have those, be used for connection rather than content driven. And so same. So we're doing those morning meeting times. Often there'll be an extension where, teachers will be able to say, like, I'm going to pull these like few students and we're going to, check in on math. That they also use those morning meetings for, an extra little short lesson. We have a closing circle time, again, like to bookend the day, just talk about students' days. We have, at the end of the day, we also have small groups. The one sort of caveat to all of this is that, during the day, we do use a synchronous time for our reading groups, just because they're so individualized, and it's one of the hardest things. And I think, everybody right now is thinking, like, what's the hardest thing to replicate within your own school program? For us, it's definitely our reading program. So that's where teachers are actually using that synchronous time for small group reading. But otherwise, we're really trying to make it be that those are, the synchronous times are really for connection rather than content.
Erin, you reminded me, I'd love to add on, we aren't currently doing it, but we're about to roll it out, and that's adding more synchronous time for more social connections that are unstructured. So a recess block will be offered, and clubs will start. And we do have our after school program is still offering some of their after school programs in synchronous connections.
Wow.
That's great.
We are, I would say in every grade level, junior kindergarten all the way up to 5th grade, we all have some synchronous class meetings every week. And in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, I think it's 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, maybe just 4th and 5th, we do it 3 days a week. And it is a morning meeting, a responsive classroom morning meeting. So You know, from my GOA days, I kind of pulled in this idea that if community building is what we really need to be doing right here, right now, then we need to just focus on the synchronous experiences for that. And then instructional videos, all the teachers are making their own. We're finding them on YouTube. So we try not to do anything instructional during our morning meetings. And I know JK, you know, some of the teachers experiment with like tea parties and cute little fun things like that. The one thing that we did have to do as a whole lower school is set a morning meeting schedule, because we have siblings in homes and you have shared devices. So we had to make sure that there wasn't going to be any overlap where families would be without a device. In our house on Monday morning, there's a Zoom call at 9:30, one at 10, and one at 10:30 for each of my kids, and then I'm the last one to do with my class. And then we also make them optional. I mean, the kids don't want to miss them because they get to see all their friends, and we do the fun morning meeting activities. But we know that, you know, at 10 o'clock, both parents might be on their own conference call. They, you know, their internet might have gone down. They might have something, you know, something that's gone on, and their kid just can't be there.
Yeah.
So
that flexibility is key. Just
yeah.
in my own household with, you know, 2 parents that are working and 2 kids that, you know, are also doing, you know, their remote learning. I mean, it's challenging. And I will say, like, my kids have definitely missed classes and realize, oh my gosh, they're supposed to be in their closing meeting time. And it is what it is. I think it's just, you have to be flexible.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that Erin mentioned a while ago around getting everything consolidated and all the links for the meetings in one place on Sunday night, I can say, when you referenced 2 working parents, it's not that helpful for the link for the meeting to arrive at mom and dad's email 5 minutes before it starts. When mom and dad are at work.
At time, please. Yeah.
Tell you, and that
We've missed a couple classes that way.
that is actually feedback that we got from families. You know, we were sending out the schedules daily, and they'd come in the morning, and families were just saying, oh my gosh, if you could please send those over the weekend, you know, at the latest Sunday night, so that we can sort of prep for the week and know exactly what is going to be expected, if we can print some things out. So that was great feedback from families, and I think it's been successful.
Right. Mm-hmm. Talking about devices, a number of devices, that reminds me of a question that's coming up quite a bit. And I sort of put this under best practices or development. Screen time. There are a lot of questions on screen time for these ages. I know I have 2 on the older elementary end, but I worry about that quite a bit. And I have a tiny one who is also having her preschools just kind of nailing it with all these opportunities to connect. But how much is too much? Are we just chalking this up to this is the time and this is what's happening? Do you have any thoughts on that? Recommendations? Does your school have a policy on that?
I have 2 things I'd love to share. As a parent, I'm just kind of letting it go. It is what it is right now. It's in order for my daughter to do all of her learning, she's on the screen a lot more than I would like. And when she's not learning, sometimes she wants to veg out by watching a TV show, and I'm letting that happen. But I do want to share an anecdote. A friend of mine is an educator in California, so they were sort of 2 weeks ahead of us in terms of school closures, and they went fully online all day. Their regular school day just put online. And she said after 2 weeks, her students were complaining about headaches. They weren't able to sleep at night. So she said to her colleagues, I want you guys to all take Friday off, use it as a prep day, and I'm going to plan a multidisciplinary project for our students. And it was all off screen. She had them download a podcast and listen to it while they went for a walk. She had them journaling on paper. The kids loved it so much they asked for it every Friday.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think your answer is spot on. I think there's, you know, it's the balance. And I think we need to say, to some extent, like all of the information that we've all read about brain research and, screen time for young children, I think there's, to some extent, we have to be flexible and know that, like, anything we're doing right now with remote learning in elementary schools best practice? Absolutely not. And that's, that's just where we're at. But at the same time, like, they need to learn. So screen time is essential. And, from reaching out and just, from colleagues that I worked with back in Seattle, where I was before, and in the same boat, they were, 1 to 2 weeks in. The feedback that I was getting is that, to try to limit your synchronous live times to no more than 3 times. I thought that was just sort of like a nice, to sort of bookend your day and maybe one in the middle, and to sort of keep that as the cap. I thought that was great advice. So that's sort of where we've set our framework.
I'm gonna throw one of the questions from the Q&A in here because I think it's related to the screen time. And this comes from our good friend David Boxer at the Blake School, who wants to know.
Hi, David.
Hey, David. David wants to know more broadly what schools are doing to promote social emotional learning and well-being through this time, which of course is related to being on the screen all the time, but it's broader than that as well. Is that something you all have dug into as you've done this work?
I can speak to that a little bit. So I was, this is where I feel like we really need to lean on our community members of our schools. So, we're lucky enough right now to have a school psychologist. She's, and I think most independent schools have somebody sort of in that role. And she's been able to jump into our morning meetings and, talk to students a little bit about, she's not using the big heavy words like anxiety, but she's doing more of like, how are you feeling? And to really acknowledge those feelings and to give students a place to be able to say, like, this is weird, and to be able to say, you're right, it's totally weird, and to be able to just, really echo what they're saying and validate it. I think, quite honestly, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be leaning on her more for, parent education, because I think what we're seeing in, in our small windows of our Zoom times with our students, when when a child is off, when something doesn't feel right. And that's when, amazing teachers are going to be able to reach back out and say, like, what's going on? But I think what parents are really, really asking for right now is like, I'm really seeing that my child is like more weepy or more, upset at home, and what's going on? And so we're going to be having her do a series of coffees with parents, basically around social emotional wellness and what's going on with kids right now. If you are seeing more challenging or just different behaviors.
Yeah, I think, our lower school counselor posted some really sweet videos to our 5th graders, just about mindfulness and how to take care of yourself right now. And then this whole week, our director and assistant director have been posting just morning announcements for kids to listen to each day. And I really believe that sense of normalcy, that the sense of structure and predictability of a day goes a long way for helping kids handle the emotional aspects of what's happening right now. So yeah, I'm sorry, I just got distracted. My earbuds are dying.
Yeah. I think too, a lot of the assignments that I see my kids are coming from maybe special subjects teachers where they're getting some asynchronous opportunities. They have been pulled outside. They've been asked to interview a parent or interview a grandparent on Zoom. Like, there's a lot of opportunities to make connections, celebrate a friend's birthday by calling them at lunch or, whatever that might be. And having those opportunities for the human connection piece, I know for my kids has been immensely helpful and valuable. And I think, there is somewhat of an expectation, and you all might be able to speak to this as educators, as school leaders, that maybe the school handles that. But, some of the questions here are, how can we give advice to parents on those those little tidbits or those little opportunities to do that without expecting them to do too much. Let it be a light lift, but something that might boost their kids' day in some way. Do you all have any thoughts on that? How to advise parents through that?
Well, again, just because we've gone through these parent coffees where, that's something that's coming up, and, I actually love getting the feedback from families about like some of their ideas and what we could, what we can do as a school. And then also to be able to say, like, well, this is something that, our parent association could help out with, or our class parents. But we had a parent this week, and his son's an only child, and he said, my son's really struggling because he doesn't have those playmates or those classmates. There's really no one there just except these adults. And is there a way for some of the older students at your school to be able to reach out and do, maybe a buddy system, or, and I thought, gosh, what a great idea. And, we talked about that as an administration today, about how, some of our sixth graders might be able to pair up with some of our second graders. But I also think like, some of the, like the recess, I know that Megan was talking about, like some of the ways that, her school is able to do that. I think, being able to reach out to like your parents association or your class parents to be able to set some of those things up so that kids have that like social connection time. I think that's a great way to do it too.
I think this just popped into my head too. I mean, learning is social.
Yeah.
And anecdotally, in the classroom, you would never have to worry about that unless you wanted kids to strictly be working independently. But because naturally they gravitate to each other, naturally they want to share their learning and their projects with each other. And in our house in particular, we've really struggled with our fifth grader, trying to get him to understand that he needs to be doing these assignments. And the two things that have worked yesterday and today, fingers crossed, is we let him FaceTime with a friend to have like a little study session for 45 minutes. And they genuinely talked about what they were working on and where they got their answers, and they were comparing what they were doing, and it was amazing. So I feel like for parents, I would love to figure out a way to encourage that kind of social learning. Tell parents it's okay to let your children get some Zoom calls together with their friends, as long as they're all talking about what the day's activities are.
I'll relay an anecdote that's actually one of the kind of beautiful things to come out of this. Is my kids have lots of cousins around the same age that they don't see very often, but they love to. And they have been doing a book group with grandma. All the cousins who are 8, 9, 10 years old. And that didn't come from the school. It came sort of organically from the family. But there are lots of opportunities like that to try something a little different and give kids something to look forward to.
Gosh, I love that, Jason. And I think, that just gave me an idea, just as, school communities, like this is really where I feel like just share everything that's working with our school community. I don't have an answer for that, but I really do love, the opportunity for families to be able to say, hey, this is something that we're doing and it's really working. Because I think we're all struggling. We're all struggling to find, things to keep our families connected and our kids connected. And if there's anything that's working, and that's such a great idea, I mean, I would use that with my own family and extended family. So I think for us to be able to serve as our independent school communities and really make it a community where what's working and share ideas, I love that.
Two things that came out of our last division meetings, both the lower division and the upper division, was we need to find a way for teachers to share with one another their successes and failures, because they're not connecting in the faculty room anymore. So finding a system, a platform for them to share exemplary lesson plans, share something that worked really well for them. And then also for parents to share with one another. So right now that's what we're working on, trying to figure out ways that we can get our teachers connecting with one another and our families connecting with one another to share just what's working well for your family or what's not, and find someone you can talk to about that.
Right. That's one of the conversations that came up in our the leadership roundtable meeting that Michael Nachbar hosted last Friday, was this idea of capturing these this really great work from your teachers and making real intentional opportunities for them to share that and connect with them on a personal level, but also I heard what you're doing is so great. Let's figure out how we can do that as a whole group or even long term when we go back and things have changed a little bit. What are we taking away from this experience that we can talk about? It's also a hopeful conversation, I think, for faculty to engage in, which is good too. I wanted to shift gears slightly and talk a little bit about assessments. There were a lot of questions that came in about assessing student learning right now, and in particular at this age. And maybe again, this is talking about younger students and what we're hoping to get from that with the very young students, but also as they get a little bit older. My fourth grade daughter, I want to know that she is grasping concepts as a parent. So can you speak a little bit to what assessments look like for your schools right now?
I can jump in. So, the fact that we're doing these synchronous reading times within our, small reading groups, our teachers are taking time at the end of that, half-hour block. And this past week, they've been sort of pulling each student and having them stay on the Zoom call for a little bit longer to do some reading assessments so that they're able to collect that data and then track it to see where they were before the break. That's one way that we're doing it. And then also we're using, I don't know if you guys are using this as well, but we're using Dreambox for math. And for some of these, online curriculum platforms, they catch the data right there and they're able to assess student learning. So it's one extra piece where I feel like, if we're able to do it both as teachers, where it's like live time, where you're able to do small student assessments. And then also if there are, online curriculums that are able to, track student progress and data.
At our grade level, we really try to make sure that every task that we give the students in Canvas has some form of an outcome, something that they have to show us that they have done it. So it could be that they do a quick quiz right in Canvas, or some sort of text response. They might go to our Math and Focus website and complete an activity there. So we're using a lot of different tools to assess the learning, but every activity has a way for us to see, did they get what we just showed them? And then what we try to do at the end of every week for math in particular is a mixed retrieval practice. So we're going back in and just giving them 10 questions. Do you remember how to do these things that we learned, 6 months ago? Aside from that, really what we're about to roll out to parents next week is a rubric on just participation in the course itself, because, again, taking it back to those new academic skills that they're learning, we're thrilled if they can independently sign on to Canvas. And we're thrilled if they, sorry, we have pets and kids joining the room. We're thrilled if they're participating in Zooms and they're not acting like goofballs. So we're kind of focusing mostly on assessing those skills and then being able to say to parents, and yes, they still are getting the content as far as we can tell. Yeah.
There are a couple questions here in the Q&A that, Megan, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on. You mentioned that you all were approaching pre-K and kindergarten a little bit differently. And I don't know if you recall the specific comment where that came up, but is that something you can shed a little more light on?
Yes, there was a question about synchronous calls, and I was talking about flexibility and balance and how pre-K was a little different. So in K-5, we're having a weekly whole group morning meeting, and also weekly one-on-ones and weekly small groups. In pre-K, we're doing the daily morning meetings, and we're doing the instructional videos, same across the board with all the grades, but what we're not doing in pre-K is the small groups. So we are doing one-on-ones weekly and daily whole group.
Yeah. Another question that comes up around synchronous and asynchronous stuff is somebody was mentioning, and I think it was maybe a little bit of everybody, the use of synchronous time primarily for community building and connection. At any point, is there an intent to, when students have their feet under them a little bit more, to shift to more content and skill instruction in that forum? Because the person asked the question alludes to parents' desire to see and hear that, I think.
So yes and no. For our whole group, no. The whole group is a morning meeting, but the small groups, there is content delivery. There is feedback, small group work. For one group, it might be a math lesson because they need a little reinforcement of the lesson, but for another group, it might be the social studies curriculum. So the teacher's deciding based on what that small group needs. That is more content-based.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer as a teacher that they're getting something that they can stop and watch again. And you can record Zoom calls, right. But you know, I just like in a regular classroom, you don't know what kind of attention you're getting. You don't know if they're distracted by something else in their house. And then you also don't know, you know, it goes back to, does the child have a device at a certain time? I don't want parents or kids to feel like they've missed something important because they couldn't be on a synchronous call. So in the foreseeable future, you know, clearly we're never going to say never because we never thought we'd be doing this. but I, at this point, only feel like I can do instruction that kids can come back to on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
We're sort of doing like a hybrid of that. So it's that, you know, it's that sacred morning meeting time that's based on connection. And then we're extending the morning meeting just a little bit and then using breakout rooms, you know, to do like mini lessons for math or to be able to, you know, check and see if, you know, almost like an office hour, if you have, you know, trouble with a math assignment or a math concept, to be able to, you know, stick around in one of those breakout rooms to ask questions. So it's sort of a yes and, like, yes, it's always going to be that time for connection, but knowing that we have this really great opportunity where we have all of the students in one place, to be able to then say, okay, we're going to have an optional extension of, you know, extra math support, or we're going to keep you on a little bit longer for a mini lesson.
One thing that came up in there around how many screens might be available for how many kids in the house is a question around equity. And if maybe we can talk about that a little more broadly, in there's no guarantee there are necessarily any screens in the house. Or connectivity, or mom and dad, or mom and mom, or anybody is really around to support in the way that young kids need. How are you all navigating some of those questions that are just really difficult?
Equity was a big topic of conversation when we first started planning how we were going to roll this out, what we were going to roll out, how we were going to do it. We wanted to make sure we provided our students with equity of access as well as equity of experiences. So that's where the consistency piece came in. I think our school is particularly fortunate in that we already are a one-to-one program, and our older students were already taking their Chromebooks home. We did have a curbside pickup. I know a lot of schools have done that with our one-to-one iPad program. We did provide school iPads for any family that wanted to come pick it up. So that has really helped with the equity piece.
Our program was very similar, and so we surveyed families before the program, you know, rolled out, to see who would need a school laptop. And again, I think this is really just one of the really just true advantages right now of an independent school, is that they do have, you know, a lot of times they have these resources, and I feel incredibly lucky that we were able to do this for our families. And so in that respect, getting all of the feedback about who was going to need technology for their homes, we did a very similar thing where, you know, we did a curbside pickup, and, you know, coming from that, knowing that our students would be able to have, you know, the technology and the laptops, then that helped fuel how we would shape our program, knowing that it was going to be equitable. I think if we didn't have that, our program would be truthfully very different.
Honestly, before we knew the school was going to be closed for an extended period, we were planning on having pre-K to 5 be all paper and pencil. And we sent them home over March break with 2 weeks worth of curriculum, thinking because of the equity piece, we didn't know what devices families had. We didn't know what everyone's internet and Wi-Fi was like. And so we had planned on a paper and pencil rollout until the school closure became extended. And then we realized if we provided the families with school iPads, then everyone would have access to the same technology and tools.
Yeah, Megan, we did the same thing. Yeah.
On a similar note, continuing around with the questions around equity, how are you all doing what you can to serve students with the greatest academic needs, kids who may have ADHD, dyslexic, any other special needs in those regard? What are you doing to try to meet them where they are?
I can jump in on this. I know that our academic support team are continuing to have their one-on-ones with all of the students that they were meeting with during the regular school year. And our literacy specialist is also having small groups, just as she did during the school year.
And exactly the same. So this is where, you know, having our team, so our learning specialists are still meeting in small groups and in some cases individually if need be.
On a more micro level, as I'm designing my course, the course that the three fourth grade teachers share, I really try to think of it in terms of how would kids with really unique academic needs be viewing this whole thing. Are they going to be too overwhelmed by the text? Is the video going to be too silly? I think when you're designing, you have to remember that there are lots of barriers to being able to learn, for information to be able to stick into that long-term memory, and attention regulation is going to be one no matter what. But now you add in the pets that are around and the TV is on and, you know, all these different changes. And so you have to design in a way that will help kids be able to get over those hurdles a little bit more easily to be able to complete that work.
Jamie, you reminded me of one of the things I learned from my time at GOA was small digestible chunks. Always make those instructional videos less than 5 minutes when possible. And if they're more than 5, split them into 2, split them into 3, and really break it up.
That and wayfinding. I mean, you have to make sure that every child all the way down to kindergarten knows exactly what to do and what to do next, especially for parents.
Yep.
And I would echo, there are an awful lot of things tech skills that we take for granted. My kids don't necessarily know to click on the letters that are in blue to open the link, right? And so they need guidance even that far. And so that brings the question of wayfinding and helping students make learning experiences down to a whole different level. There's a pretty nitty-gritty question here again from our friend David, who wants to know if folks are recording any of the synchronous calls or mini lessons being recorded and housed in any way, or are you just doing them as synchronous sessions, and if you missed it, you missed it?
We had originally planned on recording all of our calls and letting families know at the beginning of every call, we're going to be recording this call. And then we realized it wasn't really practical. It wasn't really necessary. If students miss a class in school, we don't record those and send them home. So we chose not to record them for pre-K to 5. We made it optional for 4 through 8 if they want to record them, if they think there's something important instructionally wise and they want to share that with their students after if they weren't able to make it. They do have that option, but for the most part, we're not recording.
And very similar. We had every intention of recording our morning meetings, our synchronous times, realizing that, you know, that just wasn't going to be the easiest for the teachers. But what we have done though is, you know, it's counting on that parent communication. And so we've had, you know, parents reach out and say, you know, we've actually fallen ill and it's hard for us to be able to help our child get on at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so in those cases, we record it, we send it. Absolutely. We have a few families that are in different time zones, and for them to be able to log on at 9 o'clock, it's really hard. And so again, those are the times that we record them and then send them on to parents.
Are any of your schools using just one or two platforms exclusively that in order to ease the wayfinding issue?
Yeah, in our school, we were already using Google Classroom in grades 4 through 8, so we continued with that. We do have Seesaw in pre-K to 5 as an option. It's not required for the teachers, but a lot of them are using that. So we have 2 main platforms for content delivery, and then instructional videos, we're doing them all through QuickTime and or Screencastify. And then there's like another level of tech tools that are optional for teachers to take advantage of.
Yeah, so we're using Canvas, and that was new for grades 3 and lower. And we, some of us are also using our Seesaw accounts as well for kids to respond to different activities. And then we typically use Loom to record our instructional videos because they're easy to just get that link and embed right into Canvas. And then just the online tools provided by our curriculum.
And we're very similar. So we have a Google Doc for our schedule, and then we're also using Seesaw, Loom for our short videos, and then we're also using Padlet for some of our younger students. It's, you know, I like that it's almost like a bulletin board, and that's kind of how we're using it.
The last question in the Q&A that I haven't touched, and I think it's such a good one to maybe hear folks' reflections on as we move toward a close here, is around a comment Kelsey made earlier about the kinds of skills students are building as they do this that perhaps they wouldn't have been building in their regular school environment. Have you all in any way leaned into that, the positive side of this, that the kinds of grit and independence and other skills that students are developing as a part of this?
I think, you know, some of the things that, you know, I look at are my own children and kids sort of all over right now. I think that they're, you know, they have this, they're going to have a greater empathy. I think that they are going to understand that there's so many different ways to make a connection. I think, you know, sort of the, you know, the skills, the tech skills, obviously those will be huge, but I think more than anything right now, you know, one thing this virus has done is really like made us like boil down what is essential. And for a lot of students, you know, they're looking at their own families and realizing what's essential, what are the most important things right now. And so I think coming out of this, they're going to have that, you know, that realization that like our family is essential, our health is essential. There'll be a lot of gratitude coming from this.
One of the things that I've loved about doing morning meetings on Zoom is it is forced the kids to listen to each other.
Yeah. Yes.
Because when you do a morning greeting where one person starts the you know, the good morning, just yesterday, the morning greeting was say good morning to someone, say their name, and then do a hand signal, and they have to repeat it back to you, and then they choose someone else. And just that process of watching and listening to their peers so that they could continue it on was a struggle, a good struggle. I mean, it takes twice as long as it would in the regular classroom. But I mean, how great is it that, you know, fourth graders are now really, you know, becoming more in tune with each other and having to listen.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to add on from the parent hat here. I've seen my daughter have to be a little bit more independent because I'm working all day while she's studying all day. So it's not a typical evening where we sit down and she can do her homework and I can help her. And also she's had to be more of a self-advocate. If she doesn't understand something, if she's not getting something, she needs to call her friends and ask, or reach out to the teacher and ask for clarity. But I'd love to flip this question a tiny bit and say, what it's the new skill set that my faculty now have.
Yes.
So many teachers are learning so many new skills that I really think are going to transform their teaching if and when we get back to being in a brick and mortar classroom. I think about the value that this will have in the long run.
Teachers are my heroes right now as a parent, as a healthy person, because I know we have a lot of heroes. Teachers are way up there on my list. I agree with you. I have one last thing. We have like 1 minute of time, but I do think a lot of teachers who are going through this would love to know, do you have any schools, any models that you think you used as a great resource that might help other schools, other independent schools, or other schools in general, and educators sort of look at something that might be working? Anybody have some?
I know everything that I know because of GOA.
Oh.
So it's been
checks in the mail.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, I never once thought that I would be in this position after this many years, and it's all coming home now. Like, okay, it's time.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I cannot possibly count how many times I've mentioned GOA in the last 4 weeks in terms of being intentional about what we're doing with our students and how we're doing it. Topics like wayfinding, videos being in small digestible chunks, really the work that GOA has been doing for a decade has really influenced how I'm approaching this situation at my own school.
Yeah, a phenomenal resource for sure.
Well, that to me, that's a great way to end. But I just want to thank you all so much. Again, for our participants, there will be a recording of this on our website, on our COVID-19 resource page, where there's tons of other resources and recommendations and opportunities to look at what other schools and other educators are doing. Thank you all so much. Jason, thanks for the help. I appreciate it. Be well, stay healthy, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.